Hello, my name is Jerice Barrios, and I am the archivist for the Cenacle Sisters of the North American Province. I will be using the collections of the Cenacle Sisters archives to tell the story of Mother Majoux, a Cenacle sister who lived from 1863 to 1938. The primary resource I used to put together this presentation was a biography called Pioneer in Adaptation, written by a Cenacle sister named Sister Winifred Corrigan and published in February 1964. I supplemented this with two other biographies, one by Sister Helen Lynch, another Cenacle sister, who circulated her biography soon after Mother Majoux's death in 1938, and another biography written by an unknown French sister that was circulated after World War II. Marie Majoux was born on September 17, 1863, at Montbrison, a city near Lyon, France. Her mother was described as deeply pious and of rare mental powers. It is said that Marie owed her manners, her kind heart, and her depth of mind to her. From her father, she inherited her physique and her wide vision of service and society. He had been an officer in the army before becoming an attorney. Marie Majoux was tall, slender, graceful. She had a long nose, olive skin, and dark eyes, which were a testament to her family's Spanish origin. They had changed their name from Majore to Majoux when they came to France generations ago. At the age of 15, Marie Majoux was devastated by the death of her mother. Luckily, she still had the company of her father. She spent her 20s in her father's household, busy with intellectual pursuits and catechetical activities. She also cared for the sick as an auxiliary of the Little Sisters of the Assumption. Then her father's death upset her life of purposeful, independent living. In her hour of bereavement and disorientation, she was persuaded to visit the Lyon Cenacle. Friends had been trying to get her to visit the Cenacle for years, and the story goes that one very windy day, she was standing on the corner of the street when she was literally blown off her feet and onto the doorstep of the Lyon Cenacle. The peaceful atmosphere of the house where the Cenacle foundress, Mother Thérèse Couder, had died, came to have a personal appeal for her, and she saw a future for herself serving God in the Cenacle. Marie Majoux entered the Cenacle at Versailles on July 9, 1896, at the age of 32. She was much older than some of the other postulants who entered in their early 20s, but she did not allow age to be an obstacle to forming connections with her fellow sisters. She came to see Versailles as a standard of order and regularity, as well as religious harmony, and she tried to keep its traditions alive in the novitiates that she opened later on in her life. In 1898, after saying her first vows, Mother Majoux was transferred to Brussels, Belgium, where the Cenacle Sisters' general government had moved after leaving Paris due to the dispersion. As early as 1890, wise superiors detected the unfriendly political atmosphere that would lead to legislation that would force religious congregations out of France. They made plans to transfer their sisters elsewhere. Mother Marie-Aimée Lotier, Superior General of the Cenacle, was one of those leaders. Before the anti-religious laws went into effect in France in the early 1900s, she had established cenacles in Italy, England, and Belgium. After her time in Brussels, Mother Majoux was transferred to Manchester, England. Most of the community there had come from France because of the dispersion. For some of the French sisters, the adjustment to a much more austere atmosphere was difficult. They had to earn their daily bread by taking in washing and ironing. The superior was very strict. Mother Majoux was the assistant superior in Manchester and did all that she could to alleviate the dreary lot of the community. She kept her own counsel even though the superior was inexperienced and made heavy demands of her. In later years, she shared the following advice: be kind, understanding, patient with all. Be the little drop of oil which for the love of God and the community will make everything go smoothly. Early in 1904, Mother Majoux made her last vows at Manchester. Around this time, there was talk in the community about volunteering for America. Mother Majoux didn't even consider doing so herself. She said, "As for me, I am not volunteering, for I am not worth the price of the trip." Little did she know. The next year, Mother Majoux received the news that she was to be the superior of the Cenacle Retreat House in New York City. In 1892, the Cenacle Sisters had arrived in New York City to make their first foundation in America. 12 years of surviving, but not necessarily thriving in New York, had almost convinced their superior general, Mother Marie-Aimée Lothier, that God's will was not in that American foundation. In 1905, she sent Mother Marie Majoux to be superior of the New York Cenacle as a sort of last-ditch effort. If Mother Majoux couldn't make a success there, the whole community would be recalled to Europe. On June 25, 1905, Mother Marie Majoux came over on the boat from England to take leadership of the New York Cenacle that was called St. Regis. The next 21 years showed that she knew how to meet the confusing challenge of adapting the traditional norms of French religious life to the American scene. When Mother Majoux first arrived, she quickly sized up the situation. She withdrew into brief, intense prayer, got her bearings, and got right to work. One of the Cenacle sisters who was present at the time wrote, "In the month of June 1905, we received our new superior, and you could see at once that she would be the one who would take to heart this little cenacle. Under her wise, kind, but firm direction, it was the rebirth of our religious family in New York. Mother Majoux was the instrument chosen by divine providence to confirm on a solid basis our cenacle in America as to its community life and its relations with outsiders." First, Mother Majoux tackled the issue of language. Was the community going to stay a dwindling group of French exiles, or were they going to have new blood? 2 months after her arrival, she announced that from now on the recreations, which is what they called the scheduled time of socialization, would be in English, as well as the weekly community conferences. This hit home for Mother Majoux as well. Even though she had spent some years at the Cenacle in Manchester, England, she herself had not yet mastered English. Now at the age of 42, she buckled down and conquered the language. Within a short time, her command of spoken and written English was such that with priests, her fellow sisters, even the public, there was no language barrier. Mrs. Poncet, a Cenacle retreatant, wrote, "No one benefited more than I did by her boundless goodness. United to her rare intelligence, her judgment and prudence were a sure support and guide. Many a time I thanked God for having brought her close to me shortly after my arrival in New York. From that day I never felt isolated or a stranger there, and the St. Regis Cenacle became a blessed oasis where all difficulties were smoothed out after having passed through the heart of Mother Majoux." Mother Majou's prompt execution of decisions, together with her sense of the concrete, the positive, were inborn qualities, but they developed in contact with the American spirit that she so greatly admired. She was optimistic about others and trustful in God. She believed in tomorrows when todays fell short of their promise. After tackling the language issue, Mother Majoux looked at the problem of physical expansion. Plans had been made by previous leaders in New York to build a new chapel at St. Regis. Mother Majoux, who was good at executing existing plans while also making new ones, lost no time in moving the chapel construction along. The cornerstone was laid in 1905, and the altar was consecrated in 1907. In 1906, the construction of a new novitiate began. Simultaneously, in 1906, Mother Majoux committed to open a second Cenacle retreat house in Newport, Rhode Island. It was not the populous center she herself would have chosen, but it was the decision of the Superior General, Mother Marie-Aimée Lothier, so she obediently went ahead. Another similar venture in 1907 in Charleston, South Carolina, had to be closed 5 years later because of a lack of resources and ministry opportunities. However, the 1910 establishment of a cenacle in Boston took root and flourished for many years. In New York City, Mother Majoux enjoyed the approval of the clergy, with the Paulist, Monsignor John J. Burke, being a staunch supporter, who even coined her favorite title, Mother of All. From 1912 to 1926, Mother Majoux had another title, Vicar Provincial of the Cenacles in America. Each cenacle was assigned its own local superior, and Mother Majoux was in charge of overseeing all of them. During her time as provincial, the number of cenacle retreat houses in the United States grew to 5, with the addition of Chicago in 1920 and Ronkonkoma in 1922. In 1922, she took on the double role of local superior for St. Regis and Vicar Provincial. Besides her regular visits to other cenacles in the United States, she directed the tertians, which is the final stage of the formation process, and saw them daily during their 30-day retreat before final vows. Mother Majoux's leadership was approved by the official delegation sent from Europe by Superior General Mother Marie-Aimée Lothier. It was said of her, she could so well understand the American mentality while still maintaining the spirit of the cenacle in all its purity. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In all things, charity. In her own words, Mother Majoux expressed her ideal of religious leadership. One must have true ideas of what the superior ought to be. Mother of souls, of hearts, and bodies. Striving to make the yoke of the Lord sweet and light, making her daughters love the exigencies of their rule. Knowing indulgence in the face of the limitations of one's daughters, which is one of the great fruits of experience. In 1914, the First World War disrupted the communications between the general government in Europe and the vicariate in North America. Sister Agnes Schmidt, who entered the New York Novitiate in 1913, recalled the war's effects on Mother Majoux. Who can tell of the sorrows of that dear mother when communication with the center was no longer possible during the First World War? Her keenly alert mind, mirrored through dark brown eyes, was indeed more aware than we of the era of war and hardship which would burden humanity even to this day. Finally, the war ended in 1918, and Mother Majoux was called back by Superior General Marie-Aimée Lothier to Europe for the chapter of 1919 in Brussels. Seeing in person the need for recovery and reconstruction in Europe, Mother Majoux was even more determined to make the American province a center of vitality for the congregation. She sailed home to the United States full of purpose. At the chapter, she had received permission to make a foundation in Chicago, as long as she received a sign. When she reached New York, a letter of invitation to open a Cenacle retreat house in Chicago was waiting for her from Archbishop Mundelein. This was the sign. In January 1920, when Mother Majoux and her companion, Mother Ludovica Theodoli, arrived in Chicago after an 8-hour train ride, they were met by a Paulist father and a longtime retreatant. they were immediately whisked away to a prospective house at 513 Fullerton Parkway. Even though the conditions in Chicago seemed primed for success, Mother Majoux thought long and hard about asking her eastern daughters to come so far. In those days, Chicago represented the West, and the West was so far away. In all things, Mother Majoux put her final trust in God, and in 1920, just in time for the Vespers of St. Joseph, the first community of Cenacle Sisters arrived to take possession of the house at 513 Fullerton, where they would remain for 100 years. As Mother Majoux later wrote, "It would seem as though the good and faithful head of the Holy Family wished to prepare a dwelling for Our Lady and her Divine Son, a dwelling very humble but full of promise, a little seed destined to become a great tree, under whose branches numberless souls would come to rest and be refreshed." Mother Majoux held the title of novice mistress in addition to superior for 7 years. But when it came to the details, she relied on a contemporary from her own time in the novitiate, Mother Thérèse de la Chapelle. For a long time, Mother Majoux felt that the novices needed a house in the country, away from the hustle and bustle of New York City. In 1921, a friend of the Cenacle, Miss Maud Adams, an actress famous for originating the role of Peter Pan for the American stage, offered to show them a property with more suitable surroundings, a farm in Ronkonkoma on Long Island. On May 28, 1921, Miss Adams and her secretary drove by car to Ronkonkoma with Mother Majoux and 2 other Cenacle sisters. The sisters were delighted by the old trees, the rolling hills, and the little lake that served to mirror the house. Before leaving, the Cenacle Sisters secretly buried a miraculous medal and a relic of Mother Thérèse Coudert in front of the house. Just a few days later, Maud Adams came in person to offer her estate unconditionally to Mother Majoux for the cost of $1. The sisters took possession of Ronkonkoma in 1922, but it wasn't until 1927 that the construction of a new building was completed and the novitiate moved from St. Regis to Ronkonkoma. Mother Majoux was called back to Brussels for the chapter of 1926. Mother Marie-Aimée Lautier had died. A new congregational leader needed to be selected. Somewhat to her surprise, Mother Majoux was elected Superior General for a term of 12 years with residence in Brussels, but with the mandate to return the general government to France as soon as possible. As much as she regretted leaving her American daughters, and as much as they grieved to lose her presence among them, ultimately Mother Majoux gave herself up completely to the will of the congregation. By 1931, she accomplished the difficult task of moving the government from Brussels to Paris, and she served as Superior General until her death in 1938. Mother Majoux was always eager for news from the Cenacles in the United States, and returned to visit 3 times during her term as Superior General, in 1928, in 1931, and in 1934. Mother Majoux was grateful for the personal letters from the 6 American Cenacles and tried to answer them all. As she once wrote, "Everything that makes me follow persons and things rejoices my American heart." In 1934, Mother Majoux had her first heart attack while she was visiting St. Louis. She was very ill on the journey back to Paris and never fully recovered. In 1936, she wrote, "We are in the hands of God. Ask the good God that I may know how to be old. and not bring on these heart attacks by acting sometimes as if I was ignoring it. In June 1937, Mother Ida Barlow, a Cenacle superior from the U.S., who was something of a pioneer herself, visited Paris and shared her observations of Mother Majoux. It is really wonderful to see her so absolutely abandoned to the divine will, so continually serene and patient in the long isolation from the community and from the activity which was so much a part of her. We can all be proud of our mother and may well strive to imitate the virtue she exemplifies. Her confidence in divine providence is only equaled by her devotion to the Holy Spirit, who is the guide and inspiration in her life. Mother Helen Lynch, Mother Majoux's longtime secretary, and later the author of In the Shadow of Our Lady of the Cenacle, wrote the following evocative description of Mother Majoux. Mother Majoux's personality and words aroused in others the desire of the best gifts. Her own character seemed molded by long years of prayer. High-spirited and of keen sensibilities, she was meek. Highly gifted, successful, and honored, she was lowly in mien, humble in word and action. Disposed to reflection and balanced in her judgments, she was calm and prayerful in her decisions. God shows me no other way, she would frequently remark after prayerful concentration. Yet, if unforeseen circumstances proved that a new course was necessary, she immediately surrendered to God's leading. In her final illness, when she could no longer write or talk, Mother Majoux prayed, adapting herself moment by moment to God's will until the end. That adaptable turn of mind was hers, even as she left her body on March 9, 1938, and her pioneering soul reached eternity.